So this league has been pretty decent. I can't complain. Our group did phenomenally well.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Doctor!
Please make this map worth it.
Oh,
Holy shit!
Four swings!
Okay.
Whoa! Dude, yeah, okay. Oh.
Three apothecary.
Okay.
Six apothecary.
We got it.
What?
6 up.
Stars are probably worth more.
Stack
You're
17 years?
17. Wait, did you say 17 years?
Yeah.
7, 13, 17 years. I don't give a fuck.
Oh.
What?
Oh! Oh,
What the fuck? What was that? What was that? What was
Another
that?
snap!
One boss coming here on the left. Oh, he's dead.
Oh my god, dude.
Jesus.
Not a single one. Modifiers on a mob.
Might actually be insane for farming scarabs.
Oh,
Finally!
Alright.
We got to about 20 or so mirrors. It was 14 actual mirrors and about 6 or 7 mirrors in div value at the time when we split. So it was like 12 or 1300 div. And so I looked into some of the prices of things, and yeah, it turns out Aurastacking is much more affordable this league than I thought it was originally going to be. I said it was going to be around 600 div maybe, and that was an overly conservative estimate. It's probably capable. You're probably capable of getting it off the ground for about 200 if you really stretched some things and cut some corners. But you could do it for 250, maybe 300 div, which is significantly cheaper than what I projected it to be. I modified it a little bit based on the kind of content that I wanted to run, which is Sims. I'm going to walk through a couple of those decisions right now. So the first thing is I decided to get crit reduction on the Prism Guardian. Crit reduction is a pretty good implicit. Almost every implicit that can roll here is really good. Like getting an aura skill from this, except for discipline, is usually a good option. Getting plus level of auras is really good. Even physical taken as Ellie or Chaos is really good. Makes your armor more effective. I went with crit reduction because crit reduction is a big part of being able to tank Sims. And while this build can't face tank some of the later waves, it can take a couple of hits, which is good enough. I'm also getting crit reduction from the Watcher's Eye here. I was able to work in a Watcher's Eye. And I was able to do Sims consistently enough to drop a 1-0. I might die like 1 or 2 times per sim depending on like the wave mods, but for softcore that's perfectly fine, and they still take about 25 minutes to run, which is reasonable. So I was able to get a 1-0 voices and then snipe a 3-0, but not required for the build. You can run on 3-5s. That's exactly what I started on, and it works just fine. So another change I made was Cold Pen. Crit Multi it's definitely a good support gem, but it just doesn't cut it for Sims. Basically, if enemies have extra cold res or they have crit reduction, then Cold Pen is better. And typically this means the enemies that you want more damage on, you have less damage on for critical strike multiplier support. And that's where Cold Pen support comes in. Any situation in which they have crit reduction from map mods, from rare monster mods, etc., etc., and cold res from map mods, rare monster mods, bosses, just inherent enemies, Cold Pen is better on. And the support gem is pretty cheap, so it's not too bad to just buy an Awakened Cold Pen. You can level it up with Wild Bramblebacks, or you can level it yourself. Either way. And the cold exposure is pretty good. Basically, the only downside with the cold exposure is if the enemies have more overcap resistance than 10%, the cold pen does, or the cold exposure rather, does nothing. But the 39 Cold Pen is still really good. But because we don't have crit multi here, crit multi is highly valued elsewhere, so I went with a crit multi Nebulous instead of a double damage. Double damage is, I'm not sure about the price. I haven't checked it at this league, but it's usually more expensive than crit multi. But I saw this up on the trade site and I just had to buy it because it's two really good implicits, and this crit multi mod is actually better for my character than double damage is, so that's why I went with it. Now, I kind of didn't talk about the amulet that you want to run in the late game on my other video, so I'll talk about it now. And that is Eternal Struggle. Basically, this is Jinx Juju, but on steroids. So it's essentially got the same amount of aura effect, if not 1% higher. 1% doesn't make a huge difference. It's usually not enough to pass a breakpoint. You might get a little extra energy shield or regen, but it's not huge. Basically, the part of it that's big is the global defenses and the bottom line. So you can get more attributes from it, but the roles and the attributes, aside from the int, don't really matter all that much. But if you hold Alt over this, it says if you look at the implicits, the descriptions on top of the implicits, you'll see that the aura effect is a Searing Exarch implicit, and it says it's exceptional. And the other one is an Eater of Worlds implicit, which on this version is lesser, but they can roll higher on other Eternal Struggles. If the one that is the Searing Exarch one is of a higher tier, it's a little hard to tell. It's not numbered like other stats are, but exceptional obviously is better than lesser. If the Searing Exarch one, the aura effect here, is higher tier than the other one, then you get the effect of the bottom line instead of the second from the bottom line. And the bottom line here is an enhanced calling strike. So we just call things that are on 15% or lower, which is pretty huge. It makes a huge difference on boss fights, and it makes a huge difference in any really juiced content where enemies take 5-6 hits to kill. It doesn't really do that much in most content, but it's pretty insane for juiced content. And that's why this amulet pretty much beats everything else out. There's kind of an argument to play with Replica Dragonfang, but if you get one with +3 to spark and good rolls, it's maybe better than Jinx Juju, but it's definitely not better than this. And I'd probably still run a Jinx Juju in 90% of situations because the aura effect there would get you above a breakpoint, and it's got Chaos Resin attributes. It's not much else you could really ask for on an amulet for this build. Now, I also went for a Mageblood just because it's Mageblood. I mean, if you have the money for one, you usually get one, right? So the way you solve the flask problem with Mageblood, because I suggested running Pathfinder and the new belt that gives you flask charges in my other video, which is a good way to play, but there's kind of 3 ways to run this based on the belt that you run. You can run it the way that I'm running it, which is with a Mageblood. And what you have to do then at that point is you have to grab a Course-Getting Elixir with a little bit of extra quality. Basically, you want the base duration here to be at or over 12 seconds. And then you want to get 25% increased flask effect duration somewhere else on your character. Now, the amount that you get can be less if you roll more than 12% base duration on your flask. And in this case, I have 12.3, so it's around like only 20% or maybe 22% increased duration that I need. I don't know the exact numbers, but if you're over 12, you just need 25% increased duration. The way I have that is by getting 4 tattoos. So I have 1 over here, and I have 3 over here. You can't tattoo the dex nodes here because the Militant Faith overrides them, so they're not actually dex nodes, they're devotion nodes. But this here, you get 4 of them for 4%, so it's 16 duration. And then you can get a jewel here, which can give you up to another 10, but it rolls between 6 and 9. Now, you can get a worse jewel and a better Course-Getting Elixir, where you can get a better jewel and a worse Course-Getting Elixir. One of them has to compensate for the other. And that's how you get to the breakpoint with the flask. Basically, your flask needs to last at least 15 seconds. You can either just watch it here, or you can make sure that in your UI settings, there's an option here for flask buffs. And if you see here, you'll see a timer here. Just when you press the flask, if it's over 16 or if it's over 15, Basically, you want it to be like PoE will kind of round it. So if it's like 14.7 seconds of duration, it'll display at 15 for a very brief moment. So you want to kind of be sure that it's actually at over 15. So if you see 16 for a second, you're usually fine. Now, for some other gearing options, I like Frost Blink for simulacrums. And the reason is because usually you want phasing for sims. However, there's a little bit of an abuse case with Frost Blink. So this is something that not a lot of people are aware of, but the cooldown recovery per normal and magic enemy and rare enemy near you when you use it is pretty insane when there's like 5 rare enemies next to you and 20 normal enemies, aka the situation that you're in wave 25 plus simulacrum. And this will feel like you have phasing, or sort of anyway, without actually having to get phasing, because your cooldown can go to 0.3 seconds in some of the extreme situations, but it's never less, or it's never more than a second in some of these simulacrums, which means anytime that you would be in danger, you can just escape the danger without needing to have phasing to have done so. So you just don't get stuck, essentially, with Frostblink, at least not nearly as much. And I'll kind of show that in some footage later. Like, I don't have as good of a chest piece. I don't have as good of boots. That's just because I didn't really want to craft them. I just wanted to buy them and get into the build. If you don't have as good voices as I do, like I got a 1 and a 3, you kind of have to drop the Watcher's Eye. There's really nothing else you can drop. You just drop Watcher's Eye and you drop this 8% damage per Aura or Herald that you're using. You lose like 23, 25% damage, but the build is still runnable on all 5s, which makes the build significantly cheaper. The rest of the gear, though, is pretty affordable, well, relatively speaking. You might actually be able to play the build for 200 div if you're able to craft some of the stuff. Basically, my reservation space is a little bit tight. It would be tighter if I wasn't taking these nodes here. So you might have to buy some 35 introspections, which can get a little bit pricey. Like each one right now, I guess there's some that just got posted for cheaper, but you can expect to pay about 20 div for these, and crafting them is pretty hard and usually involves fracturing one of the 2 prefixes. But you could buy 25 introspections for like a couple of div, like 5 div, and you'll want at least 9 of these. So the jewels are usually like 50 div, maybe, if you include like voices, and then there's like getting a good melding, like 6 div. If you have this as terrible rolls, it's a lot cheaper. Like you can probably get away with having a -5 here, to be completely honest. And then really it just becomes like your Guardian jewels here are really expensive. You don't have to have Guardian. I have Guardian, but you can run the cheapest of the 3. So Pathfinder, Necromancer, and Guardian. Now, there is a 4th Ascendancy node, as most people would be aware of, which is Champion, which brings me all the way back to the flasks. If you run Time and Tide, you can run Pathfinder, and those 2 things alone will solve your flask problem. However, if you run Tides of Time, you don't have to have Pathfinder. You can do the same thing that you're running with Mageblood here and just get Flask of Duration, and you can take, you still always have to take this wheel here specifically for the Mastery. Yes, you do need this Mastery. It keeps Righteous Fire on. But with Tides in Time, you can run Champion instead of Pathfinder, which is kind of similar to with Aurabots this league. There's really no argument to go CI. It's too expensive and not worth it to go CI for Aurabots this league. It's the same argument. You can run the 3 power ascendancies without needing to be CI. But if you run a Mageblood, you'll lose that Aura effect, which is fine, but you have Mageblood, which is powerful because it's Mageblood. Now, tattoos are reasonably strong for this build. basically, you want to run the armor ones. I don't think there's a better strength one. The armor nodes can give you like up to 40% increased armor. I'm not running one here, and that's because I need the strength. Now, int ones, there might be some better stuff, but the only thing I really saw at a glance was increased energy shield, and basically every tattoo with increased energy shield you put on is actually just 1% increased energy shield that you gain, because intelligence already gives you, like, these intelligence nodes are 10, so they already give you with just inherently 2% increased energy shield, and these give 3, so it's 1% increased. If you tattoo all 20 or so of these nodes, it's kind of like running another wheel of energy shield, which, if you look at the tree, there's only one wheel of energy shield we run, so getting extra energy shield from somewhere is really nice. And then you just have to be careful about how much mana you're getting from int. So you can have unreserved mana equal to your spark cost. There's some uncomfort there with trying to use a mobility skill and spark at the same time. You have to stop casting spark for like a quarter of a second, and then cast your and then get mana back to cast your frostblink. But just be aware of that. I'm getting extra mana from this part here, this small little 16% increased mana, and that's enough that I could tattoo over these two. But back before I had these points here, I couldn't because of the cost. I was at exactly the cost of spark with my unreserved mana. So apart from that, it's mostly the same, and you can get reasonably far just following the POB. The POB in the other video, which I will leave in the description of this video. But I'll leave you with the simulacrum footage right here.